So Diddy has completely shut down communication with his own legal team while sitting in a federal detention center. And his lawyers had to admit this to a judge in an official court filing. That is not a rumor. That is not a tabloid leak. That is his attorney telling a federal court on the record that their client has gone dark on them. The man who built a billion-dollar empire on control, on managing every detail of his public image, on orchestrating everything around him, now cannot be reached by the people he is paying millions to keep him out of prison for the rest of his life. And the timing of this meltdown is what makes it so much worse than just a bad week. Before we get into all of it, real quick, make sure you hit subscribe on Metro Society so you do not miss any updates on this story, because it is developing fast and honestly getting stranger by the day. The appeal that was supposed to be Diddy's lifeline is now dragging into what could be November or beyond, and that timeline appears to have broken something in him. His lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, spoke to journalist Lauren Conlon and basically admitted the Court of Appeals is struggling with this. The 3-judge panel that heard the arguments is apparently so divided or so uncertain that they are seriously considering sending this to what is called an en banc review. That means every single judge on the Second Circuit would have to weigh in. 17 judges, not 3. And these are the same judges, the same circuit that have already denied Diddy bail multiple times. Multiple times, they have looked at the evidence, looked at the charges, looked at the risk of flight and obstruction, and said, no, you are staying right where you are. So the idea that all 17 of them are suddenly going to see things differently is fantasy. And I think Diddy knows that. I think that math finally hit him. What Agnifilo described is essentially a court that does not know what to do with this case because the issues are so unusual. The appeal was always a long shot legally, but Diddy seemed to genuinely believe, that he would be out by summer. He thought this was a procedural hurdle he could clear with enough pressure and enough legal firepower. Instead, the process is crawling, the judges are punting, and his release date keeps receding further and further into the distance. That is the context for what happened next. And what happened next is genuinely hard to believe. Diddy's civil attorney, Erica, handling the Lil Rod case, filed a motion asking for a 3-week extension on an amended answer and counterclaims deadline. That is a routine request. Lawyers ask for extensions constantly. What is not routine is the reason she gave. The filing states, and I am paraphrasing the legal language here, but keeping the meaning exact, that she has been unable to communicate with Diddy in advance of the approaching deadline. Unable to communicate, not that the legal strategy needs more time to develop, not that discovery is voluminous, not that scheduling conflicts exist. The lawyer cannot get her client on the phone. She cannot get him to respond to messages. The federal detention facility is being contacted. The lawyers are trying to reach him, and Diddy is simply not picking up what they're putting down. Put yourself in Erica's position for a second. You are a high-powered attorney representing one of the most famous men in the world, a man facing criminal charges that could put him away for decades, and a cascade of civil suits that could strip him of everything he has left. Your job is to defend him. Your entire strategy depends on coordination, on getting his input, on preparing filings that reflect his position. And you have to go to a federal judge, Judge Oken in this case, and say the words, "I cannot talk to my client." The embarrassment of that is staggering. This is not some public defender with an overwhelmed caseload. This is a retained counsel, a private attorney being paid what I can only imagine is an astronomical sum, and she is being ghosted by the very man who hired her. And here's what that means for the Lil Rod case specifically. The deadline was June 30th. Diddy's team asked to push it to July 21st. If that deadline passes and no amended answer and no counterclaims get filed, Lil Rod clears a major procedural hurdle. He does not win the case outright, but he wins that round. He wins by default on whatever arguments Diddy failed to contest. The court already dismissed some claims against Combs Global, but the serious stuff survived. The sexual assault liability claims are still alive. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act claims are still alive. This case is not the sprawling monster it started as, but it is very much a threat. And Diddy is treating it like a spam email he can just ignore. What makes this pattern even more disturbing is that it is not isolated to Diddy. His son, Christian Combs, is reportedly doing the exact same thing in his own legal troubles, refusing to retain counsel, refusing to respond to litigation, just pretending the whole thing will evaporate if he does not acknowledge it. That yacht incident, that case, Christian is apparently handling it the same way his father is handling this one, which is not handling it at all. It is like watching someone inherit not just money and status, but a complete inability to deal with consequences, a belief that if you simply refuse to participate, reality will bend to your will. Diddy has been in federal custody long enough now to understand how this works. The isolation, the loss of control, the inability to manage his environment the way he did for 30 years, all of that has to be grinding him down. But refusing to speak to the people whose entire job is to help you is not a strategy. It is self-sabotage. It is the behavior of someone who is so angry, so frustrated, so unused to things not going his way, that he would rather burn the whole operation down than accept that he cannot dictate the outcome. We have seen glimpses of how Diddy operates when he does not get what he wants. There is that recorded phone call with Mark Agnifilo where his tone is not collaborative, not even anxious. It is demanding. It is do what I told you to do. It is fix it. It is do not come back to me until it is fixed. That is a man who views his lawyers not as advisors, but as employees who exist to execute his commands. And when those employees come back with news he does not like, when they tell him the appeal is stalling, when they tell him the timeline is stretching to November, when they tell him the judges are not buying what they are selling, his response is to cut them off, to punish them with silence, to make them come to a judge and admit they have lost contact with their own client. The psychological spiral here is not hard to trace. The appeal news broke him. The realization that he is not getting out this summer, that he might not get out this year, that he might not get out at all, that hit him like a freight train. Then there was the release of that tape, the one that showed the world exactly what he is capable of, the one that stripped away whatever remained of his carefully constructed public persona. That footage did damage that no legal team can undo. And Diddy knows it. He knows the jury pool saw it. He knows the public saw it. He knows his children saw it. Every layer of protection he had built, every PR strategy, every image rehab attempt, all of it disintegrated in the time it took to watch that video. And as if that was not enough, J.D. Vance, the sitting vice president of the United States, decided to mock him in a public speech. Vance made a joke referencing Diddy as a theologian, then corrected himself, saying, as we have found out in the last couple of years, he is very much not a Christian. The room laughed. The clip circulated. The vice president of the United States used Diddy as a punchline. And Diddy, the man who spent decades cultivating political connections, who donated to campaigns, who hosted fundraisers, who positioned himself as a power broker with friends in high places, had to sit in a cell and watch that happen. The same political establishment he courted is now comfortable enough to mock him openly. The pardon rumors, the whispers that Trump might intervene, those were always fantasy, and high-ranking White House officials have made it quietly clear that was never on the table. Diddy bet on his network, and his network folded. So you have a man who has lost his freedom, lost his reputation, lost his political cover, and is now watching his legal strategy stall in real time. His response is to retreat, to isolate, to refuse contact with the very people trying to salvage what is left of his life. The prison has its own demands, its own routines, and Diddy is reportedly throwing himself into those instead. Library duty, kitchen shifts, the mundane mechanics of incarcerated life. It is easier, apparently, to stack books and scrub trays than to face the reality of what his lawyers need to discuss with him. The Lil Rod deadline is not going to wait forever. The criminal case is not going to pause while Diddy processes his feelings. Every day he refuses to engage is a day his legal position erodes further. Extensions get granted once, maybe twice, but judges have limits. At some point, the court will stop accommodating a defendant who will not participate in his own defense. And that is the part I cannot get past. This is not a minor procedural hiccup. This is a man actively sabotaging the only mechanism that might keep him from dying in federal prison. The charges are serious. The evidence, from what we know, is extensive. The witnesses are lining up, and the defendant is giving his lawyers the silent treatment like a teenager who got grounded. What happens next depends entirely on whether Diddy snaps out of this. If he does not, the Lil Rod case advances without his input. The criminal appeal crawls toward an en banc review that will likely take months and probably fail. The other civil suits, and there are more than a few, will proceed on their own timelines. His silence does not stop any of it. It just means he has no say in how it unfolds. For someone who built an empire on control, that has to be the worst part. He cannot manage the narrative. He cannot intimidate witnesses. He cannot buy time. All he can do is sit in a cell, refuse phone calls, and pretend that makes him powerful instead of powerless. But the filings do not lie. His own lawyer told a federal judge she cannot reach him. That is not a strategy. That is a surrender. And I want to pause on that word, surrender, because it is not one we have ever associated with Diddy before. This is a man who built his entire mythology around never losing, never backing down, never letting anyone see weakness. From the Bad Boy days, through the Ciroc deals, through the Revolt TV launch, every move was calculated, every public appearance manicured, every setback spun into a comeback before the news cycle even turned over. He survived the East Coast, West Coast fallout. He survived the Club New York trial. He survived industry shifts that killed entire record labels. He outlasted critics, competitors, and contemporaries who thought he would be a flash in the 90s and gone by the 2000s. And yet here he is in the year 2025, sitting in a federal detention facility, refusing to pick up the phone for the people he hired to save him. That is not the Diddy the public knows. That is not the Diddy his enemies feared. That is a broken man making broken decisions in a broken system that does not care whether he participates or not. The federal courts move on their own schedule. They do not wait for defendants to feel ready. They do not pause because someone is having an emotional crisis or a psychological spiral. The machinery of justice, whatever you think of it, is designed to grind forward regardless of who stands in its path. And right now, Diddy is not standing in its path. He is lying down in front of it and hoping it stops. It will not. The en banc review, if it happens, will involve 17 judges reviewing every piece of paper, every transcript, every argument made by his legal team. And if he is not communicating with that team, what exactly are they supposed to present? What new arguments can they craft without his input? What factual corrections can they make if he will not tell them what the facts are? He is not just sabotaging the civil cases. He is starving his criminal defense of oxygen at the exact moment it needs it most. Consider the practical reality of his situation. He is in a federal detention center, which means his communications are monitored, his movements are restricted, and his access to the outside world is mediated entirely through the facility's protocols. He cannot just pick up a cell phone and fire off texts. He cannot hop on a Zoom call whenever he feels like it. Every interaction with his legal team requires coordination with the facility, scheduling calls, arranging visits, navigating the bureaucracy of incarceration. It is exhausting and degrading for someone used to instant access, but it is the reality he lives in now. And instead of working within that reality, instead of treating every available communication window as precious, he is letting them pass unused. He is leaving his lawyers staring at silent phones and empty visitor logs, burning billable hours they cannot ethically bill if no work is actually being done. That raises another question nobody is asking yet, but someone should. How long do his lawyers stay on this case if their client will not speak to them? Attorneys can withdraw for a variety of reasons, and a complete breakdown in communication is one of them. Judges do not love granting withdrawal motions close to trial or critical deadlines, but they also cannot force a defendant to cooperate with counsel. If Diddy keeps this up, if the silent treatment stretches from weeks into months, his own legal team may have no choice but to ask to be removed. And then what? New counsel has to be found, brought up to speed, given time to prepare. The delays would be catastrophic but entirely self-inflicted. Every day of silence is a day borrowed from a future that is already running out. And what about the other defendants, the other people caught up in the broader Combs universe? Employees, associates, business partners who are named in these suits, who are relying on Diddy's defense to protect their own interests. They are watching the captain of the ship lock himself in his cabin while the vessel takes on water. Their legal fates are tied to his, and he is not returning their calls either, I would bet. The silence radiates outward. It affects co-defendants, it affects joint defense agreements, it affects the entire ecosystem of litigation surrounding Combs Global. One man's refusal to engage becomes a cascading problem for dozens of people, and none of them can force him to pick up the phone. Let us talk about the specific legal jeopardy in the Lil Rod case for a moment, because the procedural posture is worse than a lot of people realize. When a defendant fails to respond to allegations in a civil complaint, the court can enter a default judgment. That means the plaintiff wins automatically on whatever was alleged. Now, Diddy's team did file an initial response, so we are not at the default stage yet. But amended answers and counterclaims are the tools you use to sharpen your defense, to push back on specific allegations, to assert your own claims against the other side. If those tools never get used, if the deadline passes and nothing is filed, the case proceeds on the original pleadings. The plaintiff's narrative becomes the only narrative. The defense becomes whatever was thrown together in the initial response, unrefined, unupdated, unsupported by the client's own testimony. That is a terrible position to be in against a plaintiff who is highly motivated, who has detailed allegations, and who is represented by counsel that is absolutely paying attention. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act claims in particular are not the kind of thing you can just ignore and hope they go away. That statute was designed to reach exactly the kind of conduct alleged in these cases. It has teeth. It has survived constitutional challenges. It allows for significant damages, and it carries a stigma that no amount of PR can wash off. If Diddy loses on a TVPA claim, even in a civil context, the implications for his criminal case are obvious. Prosecutors watch civil litigation, they monitor admissions, they monitor evidence that comes out in discovery, they monitor default judgments. Every loss in civil court is a gift to the prosecution in criminal court. Diddy's silence is not just costing him money, it is building the government's case for them brick by brick while he stacks library books and scrubs kitchen trays. I keep coming back to the library duty and the kitchen shifts because that detail tells us something important about his mental state. Federal detention is not club fed, despite the old jokes. It is cold, it is rigid, it is dehumanizing by design. Inmates are assigned jobs, they are given schedules, they are told when to eat, when to sleep, when to move, when to stop. For someone who's spent 30 years telling other people when to eat, when to sleep, when to move, and when to stop, that inversion has to be psychologically devastating. And some people respond to that devastation by fighting it, by filing grievances, by working the system, by staying engaged with their defense. Others respond by retreating into the routine, by embracing the small comforts of predictability, by disconnecting from the outside world because the outside world only brings bad news. Diddy appears to have chosen the second path. The library is quiet, the kitchen is simple, the tasks are clear. Stack the books, scrub the trays, do not think about the 17 judges, do not think about the vice president's punchline, do not think about the tape, just stack the books. But the books will not save him, the trays will not save him. The only thing that might save him, or at least mitigate the damage, is an active, aggressive, coordinated legal strategy. And that requires communication. It requires him to sit down, however painful it is, and talk to the people he is paying to defend him. It requires him to review documents, to provide factual input, to make decisions about settlement versus trial, about which arguments to press and which to abandon. These are not decisions lawyers can make on their own. They are fiduciary obligations that belong to the client, and right now the client is AWOL. The broader cultural dimension here is impossible to ignore. Diddy was not just a music mogul. He was a symbol. He was the guy who made it out. Who turned street hustle into corporate boardrooms? Who convinced the world that Bad Boy was not just a record label, but a lifestyle, an ethos, a promise that you could be anything if you wanted it badly enough and worked hard enough, and never took no for an answer. Generations of artists, entrepreneurs, and fans bought that story. They wore the Sean John suits. They drank the Ciroc. They watched the Making the Band auditions and thought, that could be me. And now the architect of that dream is refusing to answer his lawyer's calls while a federal judge waits for paperwork that may never come. The distance between the throne and the cell is not just physical, it is existential. His children are watching this. That is the part I cannot shake. Whatever you think of Diddy, whatever you believe about the allegations, his kids are out there in the world seeing their father's name become a verb for disgrace. They are seeing his legal team admit in writing that they cannot reach him. They are seeing the vice president mock him on a public stage. They are seeing the tape, the headlines, the late night jokes, the social media commentary that never stops. And they are seeing him respond by going silent, by withdrawing, by refusing to fight. What does that teach them? What lesson does that model? Christian is already mirroring the behavior, dodging his own legal problems with the same avoidant reflex. The pattern is replicating in real time and nobody seems able to break it. There's also the question of money, which never goes away in these cases. Legal defense at this level is not cheap. The criminal case alone is a multi-million-dollar endeavor, and the civil cases add millions more. Diddy's assets are not what they once were. The businesses have taken hits. The deals have dried up. The revenue streams that used to flow automatically now require explanation, justification, and in many cases, distancing. Every month of legal fees drains the reservoir further. And if his lawyers eventually withdraw because he will not communicate, the cost of bringing new counsel up to speed will be enormous, assuming anyone qualified is willing to take the case at that point. Silence is expensive. Silence is the most expensive thing Diddy has ever bought, and he is buying it in bulk. I also think we need to consider the possibility, and I am speculating here, but it is informed speculation, that Diddy's silence is not just anger or depression or psychological collapse. It might also be calculation. It might be a strategic choice dressed up as a meltdown. If he does not talk to his lawyers, he cannot be pressured into making decisions he does not want to make. He cannot be forced to confront evidence he does not want to see. He cannot be prepped for depositions or testimony that might incriminate him further. In some twisted way, silence is the last form of control available to him. He cannot dictate the outcome, so he dictates the process. He cannot tell the judge what to do, so he tells his lawyers nothing. It is a scorched earth approach to litigation, and it is consistent with everything we know about how he operates when cornered. He would rather destroy the village than let someone else rule it. But if that is the strategy, it is a losing one. The village will be destroyed either way. The only question is whether he has any say in what gets rebuilt afterward. Right now, he is choosing to have no say. He is choosing silence over influence, absence over agency. And the legal system is perfectly happy to accommodate that choice. Courts do not beg defendants to participate. They do not send search parties for clients who ghost their own attorneys. They simply move forward. The deadlines pass, the orders get entered, the judgments get rendered, and one day Diddy will look up from his library cart or his kitchen station and realize that the world has moved on without him. That his fate was decided while he was stacking books and scrubbing trays and pretending that none of it was happening. That day is coming faster than he thinks. The en banc decision could drop at any time. The Lil Rod deadline will arrive whether he is ready or not. The other civil plaintiffs are not going to wait. The prosecution is not going to wait. The media is not going to wait. The only person waiting is Diddy, sitting in a cell, refusing calls, waiting for a reality that will bend to his will, but reality does not bend. Reality does not care about your empire or your reputation or your carefully cultivated image. Reality just keeps moving, and it leaves behind anyone who refuses to move with it. So here is where we are. A billionaire mogul who once commanded boardrooms and arenas and red carpets now cannot command his own attention span long enough to return a phone call from the people trying to keep him free. His appeal is stalled, his civil defense is crumbling, his political allies have evaporated, his public image is beyond repair, and his response to all of it is to go silent, to retreat into the smallness of prison routine, to pretend that if he does not acknowledge the avalanche does not exist. But the avalanche does exist. It is moving, it is gaining speed, and when it hits, it will not matter whether he saw it coming or not. The only thing that will matter is that he did nothing to get out of the way.